Everyone laughed when the black janitor said he used to train, but no one was laughing after his first move. Not even the black belt who mocked him the loudest. In a room full of martial artists, only one man wore no uniform, just an old jumpsuit and a mop. But when arrogance pushed too far and mockery turned personal, he stepped forward. And with a single silent movement, the entire dojo froze. This isn't just a story about fighting. It's about prejudice, quiet strength, and the moment truth humbles ego. Watch what happens when the underestimated finally stop sweeping floors and start making waves. It all started on a rainy Tuesday in a quiet corner of the downtown sports complex, the kind of place where college athletes trained, amateur boxers sparred, and corporate professionals gathered for midday yoga. The gym floor glistened slightly under fluorescent lights, and the faint smell of sweat and rubber mats lingered in the air. Among the crowd of busy, chattering people, a black man named Marcus silently pushed a mop across the far side of the training hall. Most people barely noticed him. He wore navy blue coveralls, headphones dangling from his neck, and sneakers that had seen better years. He was the janitor, the cleaner, the ghost in the background. But Marcus wasn't just anyone. He'd been working at the sports center for nearly 7 years. Always punctual, always polite, and always quietly efficient. People appreciated him, sure, but nobody really knew him. He rarely spoke more than a sentence or two, and though he moved slowly, there was something unusual about the way he carried himself. Balanced, grounded, like someone who wasn't just walking, but aware of every step he took. That Tuesday, a new face arrived at the gym, Jordan Hayes, a well-known regional karate instructor who had recently opened his own dojo just a few blocks away. Young, flashy, confident, Jordan walked into the gym with his black belt tied proudly around his waist, his entourage recording his every move on their phones. He was there to do a few demonstrations, promote his classes, and maybe, if someone was lucky, throw a few mock punches for social media. Jordan had charisma, no doubt. He laughed loud, slapped shoulders, and acted like he owned the room within 5 minutes of arriving. And as fate would have it, his gaze soon landed on Marcus, who at that moment was wringing out a mop bucket near the far wall. "Hey," Jordan called out with a grin, pointing to Marcus. "You ever try karate?" Marcus looked up. His expression didn't change much. "A little," he said softly. Jordan chuckled. "You look like you could use a workout. How about a friendly spar? You versus me, for fun." His tone was teasing but playful. The people around laughed some awkwardly, unsure if he was being serious. Marcus paused. Then, he gently leaned his mop against the wall and walked over. Not fast, not slow, just calm. "You sure?" he asked. That's when it happened. Jordan winked to the crowd. "Come on, man. Let's entertain these people. Just a few light moves." A ring formed almost instantly. People pulled out their phones, forming a loose circle around the two men. Jordan loosened his shoulders, bounced lightly on his feet, and bowed mockingly. "Don't blink, folks," he said. Marcus simply raised his hands, not in a traditional fighting stance, but in something looser, almost meditative. And then, Jordan made the first move. A quick, sharp jab aimed at Marcus's shoulder, fast, precise. But in one blink, Marcus shifted his weight, sidestepped it effortlessly, and tapped Jordan's extended arm in a way that disrupted his balance completely. Jordan stumbled, nothing dramatic, but enough to catch attention. Laughter faded. Phones kept rolling. Jordan tried again, this time with a sweeping kick aimed at Marcus's hip. But Marcus didn't even step back. He ducked slightly, rotated with the momentum, and gently tapped Jordan on the back with an open palm. Jordan dropped to one knee, not from pain, but sheer loss of control. A hush fell over the room. Jordan stood up, flushed, trying to mask his surprise. "You've done this before," he said, not smiling anymore. Marcus simply nodded. "A bit." What no one knew, what no one had ever asked, was that Marcus had once trained under a legendary martial artist overseas. In his 20s, he'd won underground matches across South Asia and quietly walked away from the competitive circuit after an injury. He had nothing to prove anymore. He'd found peace in cleaning, in routine, in anonymity. But movements like his? Muscle memory never dies. Jordan attacked a third time, this time serious. His fists moved faster, his feet sharper, his body more aggressive. But now it wasn't a demonstration. It was ego. It was pride. And Marcus? He simply flowed, every strike Jordan threw was answered, not with power, but with precision. Marcus wasn't fighting. He was redirecting. He was listening to Jordan's body more than attacking it. And in under a minute, Jordan was panting, sweating, and visibly shaken. Then it happened. Jordan stepped in for a spinning back kick, a move meant to impress. But Marcus leaned, slipped under, and before anyone could process it, he had lightly touched 2 fingers to Jordan's throat, not hard. Just a tap. And then he stepped back. Jordan froze. His body caught up a second later, stumbling slightly. The crowd gasped. A few clapped. Others just stared. Marcus smiled gently and turned around. "Thanks," he said, walking back to his mop and bucket. No one laughed. Not anymore. The video went viral by that evening. Over 1 million views in 12 hours. The comment sections exploded with praise, awe, and speculation. Who is this guy? Why is he mopping floors? That wasn't luck, he's trained. But Marcus didn't care. The next day, he showed up to work at 7 a.m. sharp, just like always. He mopped the same floors, emptied the same bins, and moved with the same quiet grace. By the next morning, the sports complex felt different. There was a new kind of hush in the halls, not the usual quiet of people stretching or warming up, but the buzz of whispers behind towels and glances toward the maintenance closet. The staff didn't talk openly about it, but nearly everyone had seen the clip by now. Even the receptionist, who barely paid attention to gym gossip, had paused mid-scroll on her phone the night before and said aloud, "Wait, is that Marcus?" It was the man they had walked past every day, barely offering more than a nod, was now trending under hashtags like #JanitorMaster, #MopandMastery, and #SilentSensei. Marcus, however, hadn't changed a thing. He arrived at the gym just before sunrise like always, parking his old silver hatchback behind the loading zone. He clocked in, tied his boots, filled his mop bucket, and began his morning rounds. To him, the work was the same. Stains didn't care about online fame. Garbage bins didn't empty themselves. Fame was noise. Discipline was clarity. But Jordan Hayes wasn't nearly as at peace. He had spent most of the night spiraling. He watched the video over and over again, slowing it down, studying Marcus's movements, trying to convince himself there was some trick to it. A fluke, a lucky hit. Maybe Marcus had studied a little martial arts back in the day, sure. But this wasn't a barroom brawl. Jordan had been humiliated, online, publicly, by a janitor. His inbox was full of messages, some mocking, others curious. His students even began forwarding the clip with awkward, "Wow, this guy's got moves" texts. The worst part? Even the comments weren't cruel. They were in awe respectful. The internet wasn't laughing at Jordan. It was revering Marcus. By mid-morning, Jordan returned to the gym, not in showboating fashion this time, but quietly, in a gray hoodie, trying not to draw attention. He found Marcus just outside the locker rooms, replacing a paper towel dispenser. Jordan hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Hey man," Marcus turned, offering a soft nod. "Morning." Jordan scratched the back of his head. "Look, about yesterday. I wasn't trying to make you a joke or anything. I was just..." Marcus gently raised a hand, stopping him. "It's all right," he said. "I didn't take offense." Jordan blinked. Somehow that made him feel worse. Where did you learn to move like that? Jordan finally asked. Marcus finished screwing in the dispenser, wiped the counter, and spoke without looking up. My uncle ran a dojo in Atlanta. I trained with him as a kid. Spent a few years in Okinawa later on. Taught a bit. Then I stopped. Jordan tilted his head. Why? Marcus straightened up, looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, because ego ruins the art. That line hit Jordan like a quiet slap. Before he could respond, the gym owner, Mr. Klein, appeared around the corner. He was a short, wiry man with reading glasses and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to his hand. Marcus, he said, a little breathless, can I speak to you for a minute? Marcus nodded. They walked into Klein's office, Jordan trailing just behind. Klein sat down behind his desk, leaned forward, and said with a nervous chuckle, So, the video. Marcus raised his eyebrows, waiting. I mean, I had no idea. Klein continued. You've been working here how long? 7 years, Marcus replied. 7 years, and you've been sitting on skills like that? Klein laughed. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we could offer a few classes. You know, like self-defense from a real-world perspective. People would love it. We'd pay you extra, obviously. Marcus considered it for a moment. I'm not a teacher anymore. Klein blinked. You taught before? A long time ago. But back then, I taught people who listened. Jordan, still lingering in the doorway, stepped forward. I'd listen, he said softly. The room went quiet. Marcus looked at him, not with arrogance or satisfaction, but with something deeper. Compassion maybe, or understanding. Why do you want to learn? He asked. Jordan was quiet for a long time. Because I realized yesterday that I've been teaching more for applause than for purpose. I forgot what drew me to martial arts in the first place. Marcus gave the slightest nod. Klein grinned. Well, then maybe we've got something here. The master janitor and the black belt. Marcus chuckled faintly. Let's not get carried away. Later that week, flyers began appearing in the gym. Mind over movement, real defense. Training with Marcus in simple black and white print. No flashy graphics, no bold claims. Just a time, a space, and a name that now held weight in a very different way. The first class had 5 people, Jordan included. No mats, no uniforms. Just a quiet corner of the gym and Marcus standing in front. With his usual calm demeanor, he didn't shout. He didn't show off. He taught. Not punches, not kicks, but awareness, timing, distance, control. He began each class with the same sentence. If you want to beat someone, you'll lose. If you want to control yourself, you'll win. The message spread. Weeks turned into months, and what started as a viral moment became something more. People came not to see the janitor who went viral, but to learn from the man who never needed to prove himself. Because once someone has mastered themselves, there's no need to master others. The small group grew. By the 3rd week, Marcus's class had 12 regulars, people from all walks of life. A nurse, a single father, a retired firefighter. Even 2 middle school teachers who had heard about the janitor who moves like water. They didn't come for belts or certificates. They came because something about Marcus felt different, real. Jordan, now a regular student, came early to every class. He no longer wore branded GI uniforms or filmed flashy kicks for Instagram. He came in sweatpants and a plain t-shirt, with a notebook in hand and a hunger he hadn't felt in years, not for attention, but for understanding. One day, after class ended and the others had left, Jordan stayed behind. Can I ask you something personal? He said. Marcus, who was folding up a few extra towels, looked up and nodded. Why did you stop teaching before? I mean, clearly you're built for it. Marcus hesitated, then sat down on the edge of the mat. For the first time since they met, his eyes wandered like he was pulling a story from deep inside. It was 15 years ago, he began. After my uncle passed, I left Atlanta. I had nothing holding me there. I'd saved up just enough from bouncing and warehouse work, and I flew to Okinawa. I didn't have a plan, I just wanted to find the roots of what my uncle taught me. Jordan listened, silent. Marcus continued. I ended up at a small dojo in the hills outside Nago. The master there didn't speak much English. Didn't charge fees, he just watched you first. If you showed up for 3 weeks straight without asking for anything, then he'd teach. Sounds like old school discipline, Jordan muttered. It was, Marcus said. They taught from the bones, not from the mouth. No belts, no rankings. Just repetition, breathing, stillness, movement. And if you got impatient, they'd ignore you until you figured it out. I stayed there for 2 years, swept floors, helped in the garden, trained every morning before the sun came up. Jordan raised an eyebrow. What made you leave? Marcus was quiet for a long time. One night, he said softly, a student lost control. During sparring, he tried to win, not to learn. He broke another man's ribs. Didn't even apologize. I confronted him after class, and I realized he was mimicking me. Jordan blinked. Wait, you had students? I'd been asked to teach a beginner group, Marcus nodded. And I thought I was doing good. I showed them how to move. Sharp, fast, intimidating. But I didn't teach them to listen. I taught them how to fight without showing them why not to. The words lingered in the air, so I walked away, Marcus said. And I told myself I'd only teach again when I knew I wouldn't teach from ego. Jordan looked down at his hands. That's why you called me out that day, he said. Not because I challenged you, but because I did it for attention. Marcus didn't confirm or deny it. He simply stood up, rolled up the towels, and said, when you train long enough, you can see people's intentions before they move. For the first time in his adult life, Jordan felt like a white belt again, and he was grateful for it. Later that week, something unexpected happened. A local news outlet reached out to the gym, requesting an interview with the janitor turned teacher. Marcus declined. Twice, but Mr. Klein, ever the businessman, pleaded with him. It's good for the gym, Marcus. And it might help people find you who really need what you teach. Marcus agreed, under one condition: no sensationalism. Number. Fancy lights. No staged fights. The segment aired on a Sunday evening. A quiet, human interest story buried between political headlines and weather forecasts. It showed Marcus sweeping the gym floor, speaking humbly about discipline. Clips from class, a brief mention of his time abroad, and one powerful quote that resonated across the city: violence is loud. Control is silent. I teach silence. Within days, the calls came pouring in, emails from parents, messages from veterans, inquiries from schools, even a letter from a correctional officer who wanted Marcus to speak at a youth facility. But Marcus remained selective. He wasn't interested in building a brand. He didn't want to be a social media guru. He only accepted invitations that aligned with his values: quiet places, small groups, face-to-face learning. He called it ground-up teaching. No hierarchy, just presence. Meanwhile, Jordan was changing too. He stopped promoting his own dojo's belt programs. He redesigned his curriculum, introducing stillness and balance alongside sparring. He invited Marcus to co-teach once a month. And to everyone's surprise, he started each class by bowing not just to his students, but to the floor itself. I used to think a black belt made you a master, he told them once. Now I know. Mastery begins when you take it off. The two men, once strangers from different worlds, had become quiet allies in something bigger. Not just martial arts, but humility, redemption, growth. And the gym? It was no longer just a place to lift weights and break a sweat. It had become a place of stillness in motion, of breath between strikes. A place where, if you listened closely, the silence taught more than the shouting ever could. As weeks turned into months, Marcus's name slowly began to echo beyond the gym's walls. Not with fanfare or celebrity, but with quiet reverence, like the way one might speak about an old teacher or a story passed down in whispers. People didn't just talk about what he did that day with Jordan. They talked about how he moved, how he carried himself, how his presence made others feel. A group of young teens from a nearby community center started showing up to his Saturday classes. One of them, Tariq, was lanky, always fidgeting, always testing boundaries. On his first day, he laughed through the breathing drills, rolled his eyes at the slow-motion sparring, and tried to impress others with flashy kicks. Marcus didn't correct him. Not with scolding, not even with a look. He simply paired Tariq with Jordan. For 30 minutes, Jordan didn't throw a single strike. He just stood, letting Tariq bounce around him like a wind-up toy. And then, with a single, measured motion, Jordan stepped into Tariq's space and tapped him lightly on the chest with an open palm. Tariq froze. He hadn't even seen it coming. After class, as the others left, Marcus sat with him on the mat. "You move fast," he said, "but your mind is louder than your body." Tariq looked down, embarrassed. "That's not a weakness," Marcus added. "It just means you have a lot of power but no direction yet." From that day on, Tariq showed up early. As the gym's culture began to shift, something unexpected happened. Other instructors started changing too. Not all, of course, but a few. Those with open minds began watching Marcus's quiet approach and wondering if maybe they'd been teaching backwards all along. Some dropped their belt ranks entirely during beginner classes. Others started leading with breathing, with intention, not with impact. Still, the outside world was catching up. And it wasn't always patient. One Thursday morning, Marcus was restocking cleaning supplies when a man in a black suit walked into the gym lobby, asking for him by name. The receptionist, startled by the visitor's intensity, led him toward the back hallway. Jordan happened to be nearby, and when he saw the man, his whole demeanor shifted. The visitor was Leon Barks, a former a promoter turned sports consultant, now famous for discovering viral talent and turning them into pay-per-view sensations. And now he wanted Marcus. "Mr. Graves," Leon said, extending a hand. "Pleasure to finally meet you." Marcus didn't shake it. Leon continued, unfazed. "I've seen the footage, read the articles. Everyone's talking about you. You're the real deal, and real deals like you are rare. Listen, here's what I'm thinking. One exhibition match. You versus one of our top lightweights. We can bill it as the return of the ghost. Half the country would tune in. You walk away with 6 figures minimum, maybe more." Jordan stepped forward, already shaking his head. "He's not interested." But Leon ignored him, eyes still locked on Marcus. "Don't you want people to see what you can really do?" Leon asked. "Don't you want to prove it wasn't a fluke?" Marcus finally spoke. "To prove what?" "That I can hit someone harder than they can hit me." Leon smirked. "That you can own the moment. You've got power, man. Don't waste it on teaching kids how to breathe." There was silence in the hallway. Cold. Still. And then Marcus said, calmly, "The last time I chased power, I lost everything that made the art worth practicing." Leon opened his mouth, but Marcus walked away, mop in hand, back into the locker room corridor. Jordan stared Leon down for another beat, then followed Marcus. Outside, the wind picked up. Jordan caught up with Marcus just as he opened the back exit to empty a trash bin. "You okay?" Jordan asked. Marcus gave a small nod. "I just don't get it," Jordan admitted. "You could take that deal, do the match, set the terms, show people how real mastery moves." Marcus leaned on the trash cart for a second, looking out at the parking lot. Then he turned. "Jordan," he said, "what do you think silence sounds like to someone addicted to noise?" Jordan frowned. "I don't know. Empty?" Marcus smiled gently. "Terrifying." The lesson landed. Power without peace is chaos. And fame, when built on ego, is nothing more than noise in a louder room. That weekend, Marcus's class was full. Not just regulars, new faces, strangers, even a few older veterans who had once studied martial arts and came to see the man who walked away from it all. Among them was an older woman named Denise, who'd practiced Aikido 20 years ago and said she hadn't stepped into a dojo since her husband passed. "I just miss the rhythm," she said quietly. Marcus bowed and said, "Then let's dance with it." The session that followed wasn't about fighting. It was about reconnecting, moving with intention, feeling your body in space again. Denise cried quietly at the end, not from sadness, but from release. Outside the glass walls of the gym, the world moved faster every day. Viral fame came and went like gusts of wind. But inside those walls, Marcus had built something that couldn't be measured in clicks or contracts. He'd built stillness, he'd built trust, and above all, he'd built a place where people were seen not for their belts or titles, but for their breath, their posture, their presence. For months, peace reigned in Marcus's world. Not the absence of noise kind of peace, but the deeper kind. The kind that lived in his breath, in the pauses between each word he chose to speak, in the unhurried way he tied the drawstring of his cleaning apron each morning. His classes had stabilized into a loyal rhythm. Each session opened with silence, not instruction. Students would arrive, remove their shoes, and sit for a full 2 minutes in stillness before Marcus even entered the room. There was no music, no mirrors, no ranking. Just movement and awareness. And then one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, folded neatly in an unmarked envelope, left on the front desk of the gym. The receptionist assumed it was another thank you note or invitation to speak somewhere. But when Marcus opened it in the janitor's closet and read the first line, he felt his grip tighten slightly. "Marcus, it's been 20 years. I still remember that final night at the warehouse in Atlanta. I'm coming to find you. I need answers, no signature. Just an address and a date this Saturday." The note shook him, not because he was afraid, but because it pulled a thread he had spent 2 decades carefully leaving untouched. The man who had written it was Damian Rook, a former sparring partner and close friend from Marcus's early fighting days. They had trained together under Marcus's uncle, sweated together, bled together, laughed until they collapsed after endless drills. But it ended badly, violently. Back then, Damian was the better striker, faster, flashier, hungrier. But where Marcus sought discipline, Damian chased dominance. And when a private match in a closed-door gym escalated, Damian had gone too far, shattering an opponent's jaw and refusing to stop. Even after the tap out, that was the last night Marcus ever put on gloves competitively. And the last time he saw Damian. Now, 2 decades later, he was resurfacing with questions and perhaps resentment. Marcus didn't mention the letter to anyone, not even Jordan. Instead, on Saturday morning, he packed his bag quietly, left the mop in its place, and drove out to the address, an old boxing gym just outside the industrial district. The paint was peeling, the windows dusty. It was a place built on muscle memory and ghosts. He walked inside, and there Damian stood, older now, broader in the shoulders, bald with a gray beard trimmed close. His eyes were the same though, intense, sharp, restless. Marcus approached slowly. "You came," Damian said, a small grin tugging at one corner of his mouth. "Didn't expect that." "You asked," Marcus replied. Damian tossed a towel onto the ring ropes. "I've seen the videos," he said. "You've become a myth, you know that? Some silent monk with janitor shoes, real mysterious." Marcus said nothing. Damian leaned against the ring. "But you disappeared, man. You walked away when it got messy. You left me holding all the guilt." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You kept fighting, didn't you?" "Yeah," Damian snapped. "But it wasn't the same. People looked at me different after that night. Thought I was violent, dangerous. I was your shadow for years, and the moment things went wrong, you vanished like I never existed." "I didn't vanish," Marcus said evenly. "I stepped back." "Same difference," Damien muttered. "You left the ring, left Atlanta, left me alone to carry the mess." Marcus looked him in the eye. "Because I couldn't follow where you were going." Damien's fists clenched. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," Marcus said calmly. "I think I was lucky to realize I was becoming you." The room went silent. And then Damien laughed. Not joyfully, but bitterly. "So what now? You gonna lecture me about stillness and balance and breathing?" "No," Marcus said, stepping toward the ring. "I came because you said you needed answers." Damien stared at him, jaw clenched, then suddenly climbed into the ring. "Then show me," he said. "If you're really that different now." "Spar me." Marcus paused. He hadn't stepped into a ring like this in over 20 years. But this wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about dominance. It was about closure. So he nodded. They didn't use gloves. No crowds, no cameras. Just two old students in a dusty gym, facing off beneath flickering overhead lights. The first few moments were tentative. Damien moved with that same old sharpness, quick hands, tight core, powerful footwork. But his strikes came fast and hot, driven more by emotion than timing. Marcus, in contrast, moved with deliberate rhythm. He didn't strike back. He redirected. Each punch Damien threw met not resistance, but space. Marcus absorbed his motion, let it flow past him, and stood calmly within the storm. And then, midway through the third exchange, Damien overcommitted. He threw a wide right hook that missed, and Marcus stepped forward, not to strike, but to catch him. One arm under Damien's elbow, the other on his shoulder. He held him upright. Damien froze, breathing hard, eyes burning. Marcus spoke softly. "This is the only fight I've been preparing for." Damien tried to shake him off, but his arms dropped in exhaustion. He stared at Marcus, conflicted, vulnerable, broken in a way only men who've never stopped fighting could understand. Then, for the first time in 2 decades, he lowered his gaze and whispered, "I'm tired, man." Marcus helped him sit, handed him a water bottle, and together, they sat on the edge of the ring, two ghosts of a past that could have destroyed them both. Silence lingered in the room like smoke after a fire. The students, once amused and dismissive, now looked at Darnell with a new kind of awe, one that bordered on reverence. Their laughter had long died, replaced by curiosity and questions they were too stunned to ask. Even Jacob, the black belt instructor who had once strutted across the mats like he owned them, stood frozen in place. His ego had been knocked off its pedestal, and the way he looked at Darnell now was not with disdain but with respect. "Where did you learn that?" Jacob finally asked, voice low and devoid of its earlier arrogance. Darnell smiled politely, picking up his mop as though nothing had happened. "Old friends. Older mistakes," he replied cryptically. "I used to do this a long time ago. But I guess it never really leaves you." Jacob took a deep breath and nodded. "I thought I had you figured out, but clearly I didn't." "You're not the first," Darnell said calmly, his voice so even it was almost eerie. "And you won't be the last. The world's full of people who assume things based on a uniform or a job title. I stopped explaining myself years ago. It's just easier to let them believe what they want, until they're ready to see the truth." In the days that followed, word of what happened spread throughout the gym and even beyond it. Students talked about it in hushed tones between classes. Other instructors came to watch Darnell during his breaks, pretending to check the floors, but really just hoping to catch another glimpse of the man who had made their best fighter look like a novice. Some even approached him directly, asking for advice, tips, or sparring time. And though Darnell was humble, he never brushed them off. He offered quiet feedback, sometimes demonstrating a simple move or counter that left them wide-eyed. But perhaps the most surprising shift was in Jacob. No longer the loudest voice in the room, He became more thoughtful, more patient. One afternoon, he pulled Darnell aside. "I've been thinking about something," he began. "You know more than most instructors I've met. Have you ever considered teaching?" Darnell looked up from his mop bucket and chuckled. "I teach every day," he said. "Most people just don't realize the lessons until much later." Jacob grinned at that. "I mean officially. In this gym, with the respect you deserve." There was a long pause. Darnell's eyes scanned the gym, the walls he'd cleaned 100 times, the floor he knew by heart, the faces now watching him, not with judgment, but admiration. "Maybe," he finally said. "But only if I still get to keep my mop." The two men shared a laugh. And for the first time, it wasn't one born of ego or challenge. It was mutual, earned, equal. Months passed, and the gym transformed, not physically but spiritually. Where once there had been sharp lines dividing teachers from cleaners, belts from brooms, now there was fluidity, a sense of shared purpose. And at the center of it all was Darnell. He never did hang up his mop. Even after Jacob insisted he join the instructor team officially, even after a special ceremony was held where Darnell was presented with an honorary black belt embroidered with gold thread and the words, "Respect is earned," he kept wiping down the floors with the same care as always. He taught during the evenings and cleaned in the mornings, and to him, there was no contradiction. One job simply flowed into the other. His classes were unlike any the gym had ever seen. He didn't just teach technique. He taught awareness, humility, patience, the weight of assumptions, and the quiet discipline of knowing your own strength, but never needing to show it. Young students who once sneered now waited eagerly for his lessons, hanging on every word. Adults who had dismissed him now brought their children to his class, telling them, "You can learn more from that man in 5 minutes than I could teach you in 5 years." Even Jacob admitted as much during a local martial arts exhibition. In front of hundreds, he handed Darnell the mic and said, "The man who mops these floors taught me more about being a fighter than anyone ever has." And not just on the mat. Darnell stood there, a little uncomfortable under the spotlight, wearing his gym uniform, sleeves rolled up, calloused hands at his sides. He looked around at the crowd, strangers, students, skeptics, and believers, and gave a short, honest smile. "I've been invisible for a long time," he began. "Not because I'm weak, not because I'm quiet, but because the world is loud and quick to judge. I learned that silence is a power too. Just because someone cleans your gym doesn't mean they haven't fought harder battles than you'll ever know. So be kind, stay curious, and don't ever think your title makes you better than someone else." The applause was thunderous, not just because the words were wise, but because they came from someone who had lived them. Years later, stories of the janitor who silenced the black belt became legend. New students would hear whispers and ask if it was true. Some would try to challenge Darnell themselves, hoping to test the myth. But he never indulged them. Instead, he handed them a mop and said, "Before you fight in here, learn to take care of the space first." And through it all, he remained the same, quiet, disciplined, and never needing to prove anything. Because he had already won the only fight that mattered, the fight for respect, without ever throwing a single punch in anger.